on the computer. Thank you all so much for joining me today. My name is Sam Hayes. I'm with One Stop Transaction Services, and I'm here to talk to you about the new updates that are coming out. They're expected December 19th from CAR. I want to thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate the opportunity to share some information with you, and I'm always available if you have any questions or other issues about the items we're going to review. Okay. There we go. Why are you being cranky on me today? Just a little bit about me. Just want to make sure to let you know that I am a 20-year veteran of working in real estate in Southern California as a transaction coordinator. I'm a certified transaction coordinator, CTC, forms trainer, all of the fun stuff, Realtor Notary. I've done this about 7,000 transactions. Really love talking about forms and excited to share with you today. Before we get into anything, I want to make sure to let you know to please verify all with the broker of record of the file you were working on, and also to make sure that you are staying up to date with all of your information as much as possible. So with that going, there is only one new form that we're going to discuss and we'll get into. That's the BHIA, the Buyer Home Insurance Advisory. We're going to end up having a lot of changes coming up in June, it looks like. I took both the CAR Forms Legal Live webinar, and then they did another class for us that are the certified forms trainers. And basically it looks like they're expecting the insurance advisory to morph into being more of, it may be an addendum. Right now, they're not sure. There may be a separate line item for insurance. It's currently included in the investigation contingency. It may end up being one that becomes its own. So the problem is there's so much that they would have to change. It impacts the RPA, it impacts how it would change on several different forms, and it's just kind of making sure everything can fit on the documents. So we'll go into that a little bit more. There are many forms that are just a silent update. What they want to do is making sure moving forward that any of the forms are reviewed at least every 4 years. So you're going to want to double check if you have a form that seems like nothing's been changed on it in a while. All of the new ones, very silent. They should all say they reviewed as of 2023. The RLA, one of the major things, I don't know if you saw about the lawsuit that's taking place, but there was a brokerage company that did a very long-term listing, including filing a lien on the seller's property so that they could not sell with anybody else regardless. So that is being addressed. As I said, we're expecting June 2024, there'll be some major updates. Waiting to hear the outcome of all the litigation that is going forth. Also, a couple of new laws are coming into play that are going to impact how forms are going to be used. Little things, just a side note, I'm not going to go into these today, but if you would like the specifics, I'm happy to discuss them one-on-one. The short-term rental library, there were 3 major updates. A lot of the verbiage was updated, changed for the time frames, over 30 days, 90 days of just for the summer, little things like that. And then the business sale library, which I don't do a lot of business sale transactions, but if you have questions, we can go into it. A big one to make sure that was added, that was a side note to my last class, was single parties compensation to address to be ready for any pending changes regarding broker compensation has been changed so that the verbiage can be used for both seller and or buyer. Okay, so the BHIA, this form is going to be included with the RPA. So we're now going to have like 25 different forms when you're first writing an offer. It's that big of a deal. We all know the issues that are taking place in California regarding getting homeowners insurance. I know I've had multiple transactions over the summer that impacted. They ended up canceling because the cost was too high for the homeowners insurance. This is something your clients are going to want to be researching as soon as they start looking at properties. They need to be contacting their current insurance provider. You may want to discuss with the listing agent if you're out in a rural area or an area that might be a little bit more challenged due to fires and other things. Who is that insurance provider? And find out what's available. This also does share with you as you go through how important it is to obtain insurance, as we all know. That the contract has a contingency that's currently under investigation, may become its own in June, to obtain the insurance. Discusses the insurance market. We know that California has had a lot of insurance companies leave and what coverage is available out there. It provides links to the DOI, Department of Insurance website for resources. And again, that the broker recommends get started on this as soon as you're going under contract this process could take a little bit of time. So this is currently an advisory form. I'm expecting to see it as an addendum, which will change that it is part of the contract. It's going to be interesting to see what plays out in June and how this morphs and what decisions get made by the forms committee. The other one that's having some major changes is the residential, well, the residential, teach me to type, residential listing agreement. Again, as we were discussing, there was this lawsuit that settled where the listing brokerage basically did kind of a fix and flip. Like, we'll give you a little bit of money here, and then we retain the right to sell your home, and then just kind of disappeared. Well, the sellers went to go sell the property and they couldn't because there was a lien that they had recorded against the property that only that brokerage could be involved in any of the transactions. So that is not going to happen anymore. Here in California, we're going to add that there is a maximum listing period allowed by law for residential property improved for 1 to 4. This restriction does not apply for the corporation LLC partnership. Similar to when you're doing some of the notice of what NODPA contract, it's to protect the individual sellers. If you're in an entity where you're a known business, that's a different conversation. This also cannot be recorded. It's letting people know that that is unlawful to record this against the property. The other thing that is being drawn or attention's being brought to is the fact that compensation to the broker. So we've always had this in California. It's always been very clear that it's, up for negotiation. There is no set rate. This is what's going on. Well, with what's going on in the lawsuits, because there now is one filed in California. It was filed in San Francisco last week. So this is actually going to impact this. This is no longer, well, it's in Missouri, it's not hitting us. It's going to be something that we're definitely going to see some impacts from. We being California Realtors, CAR, from what they said, are feeling that this is going to help show some clarity that it's already discussed when you are taking a listing in California regarding compensation, that it is not fixed by law, that everybody can negotiate this. Also, it goes down to outline that, yes, down here below, that the broker's compensation is about with the same amount. So the seller has, go back. My Zoom and I are just not having fun today. So it's letting you know that, yes, we're going to give compensation to the other party. We are going to give compensation to a buyer's agent, and that is being discussed. There we go. So there's a form already. I think you're probably better off personally getting from an escrow company that you're working with or a title company to go ahead and have them draw up an estimated seller net sheet. If not, there are forms available for you in the car forms library. There's one for the buyer and there is one for the seller, the EBP and the ESP. So it's letting everybody know what potential costs along with potential revenue could be generated. On there is a line item clarifying that, yes, finances are going from the proceeds to pay the buyer's agent for bringing in the buyer. That is part of the whole situation. So this is supposed to help. If you're not already doing this, verify with the broker of record. I highly recommend a CMA for letting everybody know this is what the market says the value is of the property. This is the price point. And 2, have an estimated seller net sheet at multiple price points. Let the seller know what the impact may be. Then they can also discuss it with their tax professional, depending on what they need to do. And right now, as we know, end of the year, first of the year, when we need to sell by the end of the year or can't buy till the beginning of the year. Some extra tools that help you look like the professional that you are and get into a little bit more detail, making sure it's not just providing forms and having these signs, but going into a deeper discussion with your sellers and explaining what is going on behind it and why. And how does this help the transaction? And how does this help you make this an easier, cleaner transaction for that client? With what's going on with all the the lawsuits, they're expecting this to be majorly overhauled, most likely bringing some of the other pieces up more to the front, similar to what they did with the revision of the RPA when we set up the grid a couple of years ago. Just again, right up front, very clear. Here's where the information is. So there's no gray area or questions about what was set up. All right. So the residential lease or month-to-month agreement, that is also being changed for a few things. One of them is that the pest control, if they're unable to tent, so that can be happening multiple times throughout the year, that the tenant carry liability insurance. This is different than renter's insurance. This is saying that they are still able to provide for liable if the tenant's liable to anything that happens on the property. If a friend comes over, somebody trips, something along those lines. The bigger part of that is also to let the additional interest or additional insured. So the additional interest is what the broker would, or excuse me, the seller would want to be, because that's letting them know if something happens and they lose that insurance with everything that's happening in the insurance industry in California, that they have the ability to be notified if suddenly there is not coverage on that tenant or if there is an issue. And this can become a term of the lease. I believe it's item number 29. So you can go through these updated leases that'll be starting here in about a week. Double check that. You may want to review if you have anything that's up for renewal in the next few weeks due to the end of the year. It's also clarification that there are just too many local requirements for this form that is used statewide for them to be able to include every single one. So there may be addendums that are generated by local legal or have local addenda specific to San Diego County, San Diego City, Chula Vista, other things like that. Big one that's going to happen. Security deposit law is changing. You now can only require 1 month. That's if it's furnished or unfurnished. You can only have 1 month security deposit on file. They're looking into if they're going to create a separate form for that. They're not sure on the verbiage. There's more of that coming up again. Will be in June. One of it is that there's a small housing provider exemption. If you're just mom and pop renting out the back house, there's some terms that change that. If you're in the military, there's an exemption. They're expecting there should be changes to the RPOQ and the PMA to add questions about this, what size you are that apply to the small housing provider exemption, so you can be ready to know what questions to ask and what addendums to be using on the lease listings. ADUs. I know that San Diego's going crazy and we're very excited to have ADUs for our shortage of inventory. Couple of things. One, is it an ADU? Is it classified that? Is it permitted? Has it been gone through all that is required in the city? Does it have separate utilities? Does it have everything split out? Something to talk about. Some of the lenders are requiring that type of information if they're going to include the ADU revenue into the transaction for your buyers to be able to get approved for their loan. Also, the terminology, we say ADU all the time and it becomes very comfortable, but that could be wrong and can be misconstrued. So you may want to say the additional unit in the back, the additional units, other living units. Just make sure you're getting clarification. That's part of what this is for, to verify for the permits. Looking ahead, we've got the June 2024 revision that's coming up. So 7F is going to address the AB 968. That's that law coming out in July 1st regarding flippers and what they need to disclose. It's clarifying that, you know, if you're if you created the transaction or received the transaction without documentation, you still have to provide an SPQ this time when you're selling it. It's also going through and clarifying that there are still requirements, even if it's an entity to an entity transaction. It's all the things that we have as TCs have run into challenges multiple times, where what you're told by the lawyer, what you're told by what's required, what's best risk management, there's a lot of lack of clarity. So this is going to help get everything reiterated and revised and revisited to make sure that all the information is being shared with the buyer. The other thing is, because this will change Civil Code 1102, and they don't want to add too many things to the TDS, since that is specifically Civil Code, there's going to be a lot more redirection to the SPQ. It's a great tool. I also use the SPQA, the Seller Property Questionnaire Addendum. That's a SDAR form that was created that helps expand upon the SPQ. These are definitely items that you can use that help mitigate confusion and potential lawsuits, because the amount of information that is conveyed. When the contract was revised, I believe the last time when we did this was the 2022, or it might have been the one previous to the 2019. The SPQ became a requirement if the property is not TDS exempt. So taking that extra step of doing the SPQA, if you were a member of SDAR, is something I do encourage, and I typically put on all my files for agents I work with. Another fun one. So the TOPA, when we have my slides had a party without me. So the tenant occupied property addendum went ahead, and what they're doing is it's a clarification of how were the tenants removed? When are they going to be removed? Is it in compliance with what is required by city and state? If it's not, those tenants may have a right to come back, and that may be on the buyer. Suddenly they have tenants that they are now responsible for if this wasn't done properly, and there isn't documentation shared from the seller how it was done. They've already updated the SBSA, so they're not going to do it. They just did update it in June. They're waiting. I don't understand that part, but so this will actually be added as well. Section 12 in the SBSA will add verbiage to explain the rent and eviction control law ordinance and all of how this impacts if there are tenants in the property. Now, remember, when you're using the TOPA, this involves anybody who is over the age of 18 residing in the property who is not on title. I currently share a property with my mom. I would be considered a tenant that would have to be clarified. There have been multiple issues of extended family members over the age of 18 who were not ready to move on, move out, and it's delayed closes of escrow of a few files I've worked on. This also includes roommates, friends that you don't have official leases with. If there's anybody in that property over the age of 18 who is residing even 1 minute into once you've been accepted, you want a TOPA, because this form also protects the buyer. What it does is it goes through, it discloses everything about the tenants, but it also states that the seller will reimburse the buyer if they cannot get the tenant out and they've agreed to deliver the property vacant. That's reimbursement to reasonable amounts. What's reasonable? So these are things you're going to want to look at and have discussions with your clients, because that could be a lot of extra expense on a seller who's not understanding what they're responsible for when they agree to deliver a vacant property that's currently occupied. The AOAA is going to clarify that you have not received or will not receive. So maybe they didn't get any funds now, but they're going to get funds at close. Well, that needs to be disclosed to the seller, because the seller may feel that those funds should come to them. They're selling the property. Why is this person getting paid to buy their property? So this is letting the seller have a little bit more information, clarifying that if there's any financial transaction between the assignee, assignor, and assignee on the transaction, and it lets the seller decide, do they really want to allow for this assignment? Do they want to participate? What do they want to do? So it's a little tweak, but every time we get one of these, it's a result of a lawsuit. So something happened that this came up. So we have also the December updates. We've got change in tenancy. This is binding without tenant signature. People have had some issues. Well, I didn't sign it, so I don't have to move out. That's not how this works. Also, it clarifies that this is a notice, not a request. So this is something that you don't get an option to say, well, I'm not moving out. I am telling you, you are moving out. Another update to the commercial purchase agreement. Everything was changed from the SPQ to this commercial property seller questionnaire. If you've not done a commercial transaction, there's been a few updated disclosure forms that were specifically created. There's two mixed use ones. One, if it's mostly residential with a little commercial, or if it's commercial with like an apartment in the back. So there's two very different forms, and I'm happy to go through those with you to explain depending on your situation in the property. Fortress Fire Wildfire Report. So I definitely have a little bias on this one. I did a video last week with Chuck Pirro, an old friend from Disclosure Source. I have concerns. From what I learned about this report, talking to Chuck, was that it is not, first of all, it's not a regulated situation. It's just a report that was created, to help with verifying for the sellers if they're in high fire, home hardening, all of that fun stuff. But here's the issue I've got. One, Carr helped create this report. They invested in this report, so they are profiting off of it. Not a fan of that. Two, they use satellite imagery, but they don't specify the date the satellite imagery was from. So they could use an image of a property that maybe somebody bought, had gotten overgrown, and they've done extensive clearing out of, but it's currently still showing that none of that had been completed. That can show some material fact, because it's information about the property, and then we're in the gray area, is a material fact of up to $50,000 worth of work that needs to be done when it's already been done. And then you've got questions and information, and there's no clarification because the terms that are used in this report, none of it is regulated. None of it meets the code for the fire home hardening. And it's basically supposed to be this helpful report that I think is going to cause a lot more drama. Currently, only 3 of the NHD providers are working with them. Supposedly, the verbiage and a lot of things are being revised in June. I think we're going to see more problems with this. I think we're going to see a little bit more limitation and cleaning up, but NHD industry as a whole is not regulated. It's just to meet the need for the seller to provide the information, statutory information required that's contained inside of it. Talk to your broker of record. So far, I'm not a fan. I've only seen problems. I'm a little worried about it. It's $140. They don't indemnify you the way the NHD reports do. They only indemnify you up to the cost of the report. I'm just not, I don't know. It's up to you. What do you think? So that's my little spiel on that one, getting off my soapbox. The other one that is the other big change is on the request for repair. They've gone back. So we have 2 forms now. I think the 4RR is probably going to disappear after all of this gets done. We've gone back to including on the request for repairs. There's multiple options. So you can do a partial agreement. You can do just the purchase change price. You can do credit. So while we only had that one box currently, now we're back to having all the options just like we do on the 4RR. The way the 4RR is being updated is saying, look, none of this is valid unless we attach the addendum or the contingency removal. So even though we've agreed to adhere till we execute those other documents, it's not valid, which we've all known. But again, it's a clarification to help streamline things. All right, I'm going to close this one out. And then I wanted to share with you a little bit about just a quick overview of the forms released themselves. So again, this went through, this is a form and I'm happy, I will drop this in the chat and I will also forward this to anybody who needs a copy of it. This goes through all the business ones as we discussed. There's a lot of business changes. And then you have a couple to the commercial lease. Again, little reviewed for accuracy, little updates along those lines. Delivery for the short sale, it's reformatted so that it's a signature applicable to that option if it's either side. Did they not give you the letter when it was done? Did they not give you the letter when it was approved? I think that's preparing for, hopefully we won't see a lot of these coming back, but they have updated it. Again, that was also that 4-year window we talked about. Same thing, the HUD notice, updating that. Loan LBSB, that's now if you represent both the loans part and are part of the transaction. So the same broker, even if different individuals in the office represent the same buyer. So they've decided they're doing the loan with you and they're doing the purchase with you. Within 24 hours of that decision, this form is to be filled out. I run into many of my clients who do both that were not aware of this. It's a huge issue. It's actually civil code. You're going to want to make sure you're using it. And it's just something you fill out saying, look, we're making income off of this for the loan and we're making income off of this for the sale. It's kind of an interesting foreshadowing of what we probably are going to see moving forward regarding how they're going to do the RLA and disclosing for compensation. We'll see what comes of it. Again, more changes for the leases, listing agreements, reviewed for accuracy, everything's kind of just updated and clarified. On the manufactured homes, if that's one of the ones that also should be updated on the SPQ, they said one of the classes. If the property has been attached to the foundation, they're now saying they no longer have to do the MHPA form. It's a little, they did not totally clarify that. I think that's going to be in June, but as soon as I see more on that, I will definitely update. Again, all these reviewed for accuracy. The modification of listing, same as the RLA as we discussed with the limited window, you can only have 24 months for a listing max. This was also updated so you couldn't do a modification and go, okay, well, we said that on the listing, but haha, we're going to put 5 years on you here on the modification. Can't do it. Clarifying about the code of ethics, updating to accuracy, statute of limitations that we discussed, all statute of limitations, clarifying about tenant liability, and not the additional insured as we discussed, request for repair clarification, single party, as we said, can be used as both buyer or seller, because you could then use it with the buyer broker agreement if you needed to. And this is 18C, as I just said. So yes, they did update it now. 18C regarding indicating if originally manufactured or mobile home. Clarifying on the SPRP, that one is going through and discussing, hey, if you don't have a replacement property, buyer gets canceled. They can get out of this because you need to know that you're moving somewhere else. If you're not looking for property and just stringing me along, that's not going to work. Short-term rentals, as we discussed, seasonal addendum, short-term rentals, cover sheet was updated. That's a 4-year thing. Estoppel was cleaned up, made it a little bit easier. TOPA, as we just said, what are the legal requirements? Also about security deposits. How much security deposits on file because of that limit down to 1 month. Updated, it's now an advisory, not a notice on the WCMD. Clarified the water heater form that it's TDS. Or if it's exempt from TDS, still have to provide because the water heater is still required, smoke detectors not. Clarified again with also the WHSD. AOAA, we discussed that's going through. They could potentially get money. We discussed the update to the purchase agreement, change in tenancy, independent contractors been updated. Regarding, let's see, property management agreements have been updated. This is the whole drop down that we talked about, the Fortress Fire request for repair, saying that you need to be signing the additional documents. They removed the initials on the bottom of page 2 of the TDS. It seems redundant since they signed right above it. The whole point of the initials on any form is to make sure that there's proof that the documentation's been provided. That's why there's an extra additional initial on page 16 of the RPA. That's why it's all of these things is to prove everybody saw all the pages. Well, if you're signing above, there's really no need to initial below. The TOA forms will be different, so the signature fields will match the primary document, so everything will match up there. And that's about it. So this was a pretty simple update. I think the update we're going to see in June is going to be much bigger. I think we're definitely going to have a lot more coming up that we need to be aware of. I'm going to be watching things closely. It depends on the lawsuits and how everything else is going. What do you have any questions, or does anybody have any forms that they are just not looking forward to dealing with? Yeah, I know it's not the most exciting stuff, but it's important to know. And I think that insurance one's going to spark a lot of conversations and questions that need to happen. Well, if there are no questions and everybody's all set, I'm going to go ahead and let everybody start enjoying their holiday. Thank you so much, Betsy, for being here. I'm always available at 619-993-7264. And I look forward to talking to you next week. We're going to discuss new laws. And then the week after that will be an introduction to what I do as TC services. Again, I'm Sam Hayes, One Stop Transaction Services. Please always verify with the broker of record. And thank you so much for being here today.